Welcome to the Thresholds of Reality, the podcast where we explore unexplained and mysterious events, phenomena, and legends. Today we are joined by Fred Rutman, author of The Summer I Died 20 Times, a real-life story about Fred's harrowing tales during a summer where he experienced death 20 times. Strap in as we explore the edges of the unknown. Welcome, Fred. I appreciate you taking the time today. I imagine that someone who has died as many times as you have, time is precious. So I appreciate you taking any minutes at all out of your life to spend with us and our audience. You were telling us a little bit about your monikers, and the one that kind of really stood out to me was Repeatedly Dead Fred. Is that what your Twitter profile or your Tinder profile says?
Tinder, no. I didn't know I had a Tinder profile, but my Instagram does. This was a name given to me by my friend Deanna Petrini, and she just called me up one day and said, "Hey, Repeatedly Dead Fred, how's it going?" And decided to run with it. So I guess that's a little bit of my branding now. I have to say, your intro to this is outstanding. I don't know who made it. Did you make it yourselves or?
No, my very good friend Brian, who hopefully is listening here, he made it. He and I run a dodgeball league together, and we both have kind of diverse talents, and one of his is video editing, and he volunteered and made that for us. So thanks, Brian. Yeah, we do get a lot of compliments on our intros and outros because they're very good.
Yeah, very impressive. I'm jealous.
Well, I'll make sure that Brian knows, and then he can reach out to you on Instagram. But
Sure.
What happened to you? Most people only die one time, and then they don't get a second chance to redo it and do it better the next time. So, what happened to you? And did you get to the bottom of
it? That's a good question. Yes and no. I was told by Dr. Stephen Neff, who's an anesthetist in Australia. He was an emergency room doctor, so he's seen it all. He said what happens to me, if it happens outside of a hospital, you have a 1 in 100 chance of surviving.
Wow.
And each subsequent time it happens, you are degraded. So not like people degrading you verbally, but your condition. So it cumulatively, I shouldn't be alive. I really shouldn't. Just the odds are that improbable. So I guess I'll start off with talking about economics. Because
yeah, why not? Let's do it. That's as weird as anything.
Yeah. So I was grading some economics papers, and something happened to me. And I woke up, or I thought I woke up, and I was just off, like really, really off. And that's never happened to me before. I mean, economics is boring, but you don't fall asleep, marking economics papers. So I didn't know what was happening to me. And then I had a couple more incidents, like just trying to get to bed. I decided I was just exhausted. And by the time I got to bed, which was, 15 feet from my desk, I had two more incidents where I went what I thought was unconscious. And I was just sweating, like I was leaking. And I was thinking, what's happening? Do I have like a ridiculous flu or a food poisoning or something? I didn't realize I had died. And that's how this all started. And these symptoms went away for a couple of weeks, and then they started coming back. But when they started to return, I was in an upright position. as opposed to sitting. And I had what I call brain quakes. So I don't know if you're of the vintage where you watched Wile E. Coyote
Oh,
and
sure.
he took the earthquake pills.
Yeah.
So um, I had this sensation in my head, like my brain was having an earthquake, and
Yeah.
then my vision went, almost like the fighter pilots when they're in zero gravity, and I just collapsed, and I hit my head on whatever was the hardest object in the vicinity. This happened to me 15, 16 times.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
kept getting these concussions, and those are also a cumulative effect. So I basically had the shit kicked out of me, and it took the doctors 3 or 4 months to figure out what was going on with me, and nobody paid attention to my head. Nobody tested me for a concussion or for brain damage, and some people say, well, how could you tell if you had brain damage because you're pretty scattered to start with? And so they eventually found out what was going on, and a whole bunch of misdiagnosis and doctors just being dismissive and telling me I had conditions that were essentially impossible for me to have. A certain set of doctors kept trying to prove I was having a heart attack because I'm a middle-aged white guy who's overweight, and you know that's what we check for. But when they check the enzymes that they look for when you have a heart attack, I didn't have them. So I wasn't having a heart attack, but they just couldn't move off that spot. So they had, I guess, this cognitive dissonance, or what apparently Einstein is quoted as saying, you know, trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah.
So, after the 10th, 12th, 15th time you check me for a heart attack and it's not there, maybe there's something else going on.
So, so the to quote and to use another Wile E. Coyote metaphor, he runs out and he's chasing Roadrunner and he finds himself kind of standing in midair.
Yeah.
Uh, was the only reason you didn't punch your ticket because you weren't aware that you were dying? Is that,
That's
if you had looked down, for example, would you have fallen? Right.
that's an interesting question. I don't think so. Um, the doctors themselves aren't 100% sure why I started coming back to life on my own. Um, your body is very smart and has all these subsystems in backup mode. So, what I had was a severe onset of full heart block, which means the electrical system in my heart decided to die and it wasn't sending signals to beat. So, your heart doesn't beat, you have no blood flow, no oxygen to the brain, which is what caused the brain quake, and then you die. And so I was clinically dead like 20 times. Plus, when this repeated itself in 2013 and 2018, so um, yeah, I've been clinically dead, a few dozen times, and they don't know why this happened to me, and they don't know why I kept coming back to life.
So they don't do anything to bring you back to life, or do they? Because you said some of them happen at home, so it just kind of starts. You died, and it just your body just goes like a switch turns back on, or
I would go through a process that was sort of like if you were trying to restart a car in like 300 below weather, and it's just kind of like cranking and cranking. And I'm guessing that's my electrical system and oxygen trying to get into my brain. And, it's like bombs are exploding all around me. and it was so bright that my eyes, even though they were closed, hurt. So these visuals from my brain was generating, I could actually feel these explosions all around me. It was like getting the shit kicked out of you. And that was the process of me apparently coming back to life. So, if everything in your body had to start over all at once, I mean, that's a pretty big mission. So
that's a lot of energy, I assume, too.
Yeah.
We had a fellow on last week, and he was talking to us about near-death experiences and this kind of euphoria. And it sounds like what you're describing is the exact opposite. You were in like a panic mode, or your body at least was in a panic mode trying to jumpstart you. Was there? What was the feeling that you had going through, as you were out? Do you recall anything? Was there anything kind of metaphysical happening, or is it just absolute desperation to get back up?
Initially, in the 2009 episodes, I'd have the brain quake. Everything would go black. I would, hit my head. And we talked briefly about this. What was the NFL player's name again, please?
Damar Hamlin.
If you saw the video of what happened to him and his cardiac incident, you saw he stood up and his body went totally stiff. And then he just keeled over backwards and his head slammed into the turf.
Yeah.
That's what was happening with me. Luckily, he had a helmet on, which protected him a bit from, hopefully the concussion part. And the turf isn't exactly soft. It's not like, you're in a grassy field. So he slammed pretty hard. So between it going black and me hitting my head and then the revival process starting up, there was nothing. There was no, bright lights, come to the light, we're waiting for you, come home kind of stuff.
Right.
So for the amount of times that this happened to me, got to tell you, I feel pretty ripped off. Like, once or twice and I don't have it, but like 20 times? Come on, man. Like, I don't know what was going on.
So I had an experience one time that actually kind of sounds familiar. So I was probably like 16. I was working at a fast food joint. And I remember I was sitting there and I was talking to the manager. It was like my second day. And I was standing there and all of a sudden, I got this weird feeling, and then the black rose in my eyes. I was watching it, and then all of a sudden I just fell. Whoa. And I don't know how long I was out, but the manager guy was trying to wake me up, and I couldn't even stand up without falling back down for 20 minutes. And I felt this this tingling vibration thing afterwards. And then it never ever happened again. It was just that one time, and it was just super random. Is that do you see anything like that? Is it just instant black, or does it like I was describing, does it slowly come up and then it's over, or have you had both? Or
it was pretty instantaneous. I can't put a time measurement on it, but it was enough time because you can think much quicker than you can speak. Mm-hmm. So it was enough time for me to say something like, "Oh, this can't be good," and then it's black. What you might have experienced, and again, I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, but something called vasovagal, and that's when your vagus nerve has an overreaction to something, and overreacts to protect you, and it sends your blood pressure, to near zero, and you collapse as your system shuts down, but then your heart keeps beating, whereas my heart didn't keep beating.
I gotcha. It just my body didn't want me. My nerve didn't want me to work.
Yeah.
Said
Like,
nope.
get a new job.
Yeah.
So you use the phrase clinical death.
Yeah.
What do you what do you mean by that phrase? What's included in that phrase?
I think there's a bunch of definitions for clinically dead, but the one I was given to use when I talked to my various doctors was uh, your heart has stopped and your breathing has stopped for 30 seconds or more. So, which is a long time to be out. But, when I've been in the ambulances and things like that on the way to the hospital, they put you on the ECGs, and we've had strips of like 180 seconds, uh, of me being completely gone. Um, I'm pretty sure in the hospital, there were a couple of episodes where I was 3 to 5 minutes gone just because of figuring out how long from when I went black to what happened in the hospital setting. Um, like, you see a lot of code blues when you're in a cardiac ward, and unfortunately, and you see the response time. So it's not like on TV. You don't have this team of 8, with everything perfectly ready to, and they're all beside the patient with all the right medications and tools. It takes people time to get from wherever they are to the patient's room. And in my last incident, there were, I think, 15 to 20 people in my room, and they had enough time to get that many people in my room, plus wheel my roommate out of the room into the hallway.
It's a lot of time.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, so there's some oxygen deprivation in the brain, which, doesn't help, and all the concussions. And I had my depth perception knocked out. My balance was knocked out. My speech was knocked out. Um, I've been speaking Hebrew since I was 5. 5. And when I went to do my evening prayers, I could no longer read Hebrew. It knocked an entire language out of my head.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and it's 12, 13 years later, and I'm still only back to about 80% of what I used to be with the Hebrew.
Yeah.
So,
Obviously, this is something that may never have happened before, right? I can't think of anybody else I've ever heard of who's experienced what you're describing. There's got to be a lot of medical interest in studying your case. Have you been treated? Have you been studied? How does that fit in with your life now?
well, I think if they could see a profit in it, because I'm in Canada, so we have more socialized medicine than in the US. If they could think they could make a profit out of studying me, they'd be really into it. Um, I know I've been presented in hospital case rounds. That's when the doctors go around and they, give your overall situation to another group of doctors. But so far, that's been the extent of it. New England Journal of Medicine, if you want it, I'm available for an interview.
I'll forward this to my brother. He's a surgeon, and I'm sure he'll have some interest in it. But it seems like there's two really exciting things going on here. One of them terrible, but the other one wonderful, which is despite the fact that you keep dying, you keep coming back to life. And that to me is like the most exciting part, is that there's something with you that just refuses to quit, and it keeps jump starting you back and back and back every single time. How do you view that kind of dichotomy that you're experiencing something horrible repeatedly, but at the same time, you keep coming back.
Yeah. It took a while for my brain to unscramble to start thinking about things like that. Um, but I am religious. I do believe strongly in God and that framework. I realize other people don't necessarily. They might believe that the universe is some sort of entity, but obviously I'm being brought back for a reason. Do I know for 100% what that reason is? No, but my best guess is that I'm coming back to hopefully be an inspiration to other people who are going through whatever crap they're going through, and showing them that even though I've been beaten up to a ridiculous degree, um, I can look for the good and stay positive and try and help other people. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book and have started my own podcast. Is I want to help other people tell their stories, and I want people to know that I think Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, um, has a phrase. I'll paraphrase: "If you have hope, you can conquer anything." And that's the motto I've adopted.
Yeah. And go ahead, Kyle. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'll circle back around to it.
Yeah, and so that meaning that you have extracted, I think of that in this kind of Santa Claus framework. I bring it up a lot on this podcast, but there's 4 phases of life. You believe in Santa, you don't believe in Santa, you are Santa, you look like Santa. And if I were to sum that up, it'd be like a blind faith, skepticism, synthesis, and inspiration.
Mhm.
And so looking like Santa is inspiring others to be good people, essentially.
Mhm.
Um, how have your experiences helped you to inspire others?
I'm definitely a better person than I was before all this started. And you know, I'm grateful. I'm really grateful. Even though I lost my income because I haven't been able to work since all this started in 2009, and it's been very difficult financially, um, and to be blunt, recovering from all this. Um, you can't quit. I mean, what am I just supposed to do? Stop living? So, you know, I tried that a few times. Apparently, I'm not able to do that. I'm a failure at stopping living. So, uh, I've also been fortunate that I've been surrounded by a couple of communities of just outstanding people. And Malcolm Gladwell, I think, has a concept that you become the composite of the 5 or 8 or 10 people you spend the most time with. And I believe I have become a composite of all those outstanding people that were so helpful to me for no reason. They had no reason to. They barely knew me, but they chose to support me and help me get back on my feet. And so I'm not saying I wasn't nice. I used to be a little bit sarcastic, um, maybe more than a little bit. Uh, but I'm just, trying to absorb all I can from these people and be better every day. Am I? Probably not, but I'm trying.
That's all you can do is try.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
Hey, you know what? Close enough.
okay.
So, are the recovery times getting longer and longer as it happens? Like maybe the first one was short, and now it's taking longer since it's continuously happening. And
Um, well, I haven't had an incident for probably 18 months. Um, so what happened is they put a pacemaker in me, and we think something went wrong when they put the pacemaker in. And the pacemakers aren't supposed to fail, but they're technology. Sometimes they do. But I had an unusual failure because my whole situation's just so freaking unusual.
Mm.
So in 2013, my pacemaker failed. We didn't know it was failing. So I went through all of this again. And my heart would stop. Um, but you can't conceptualize your heart stopping because you're being kept alive by the pacemaker. So I went through a whole bunch more of my heart stopping because the pacemaker would stop. So I would stop and hitting my head again. So any progress I had made, it was, 3 steps forward and 5, 6, 7 backwards. So I had to have the pacemaker replaced. That surgery didn't go properly. So it had to be aborted because I actually coded on the surgical table. And you can read this whole crazy, crazy story in my book. Because there's way too much swearing in that segment for Sam's mom to enjoy. So then I had to wait, I forget, 7 or 10 days for the second surgery, which also didn't go smoothly. And they thought they corrected the problem in pacemaker. And then this happened again in 2018. So, because the pacemaker failed again. And so, you're making progress and then you're not making progress. And then, so it was pretty frustrating. I'm lucky I have the world's greatest therapist. And this is what, mid-January now? In last November, my pacemaker battery died. So I had to have it replaced, and that was another brutal surgery. So the 2018 surgery didn't go well. I ended up having to have a second pacemaker put in. So I was walking around with 2 functioning pacemakers. And I was told at the time I was one of 8 people in the world that they had jerry-rigged something like this to keep alive.
You're like Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I could only
They
get
didn't
the
use the
flying
term
part.
jerry rig.
Well, essentially, that's what it was because they were making it up on the fly. They had no idea how to correct it initially. So, the surgeon, and I love this surgeon. He's the one that just did my last pacemaker replacement. He was on the phone during the surgery with, other doctors around the world trying to figure out, how do we save this guy's life? So, you got to be that calm and that cognizant of, what you have to do to keep this person alive is a pretty spectacular trait to have.
I
Have
guess
there
jerry.
been- Go ahead, Cal.
I said, I guess jerry rig is a good term since they only practice medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, they MacGyvered it. They totally
Yeah.
MacGyvered your heart.
Yeah.
Have there been any new inventions or treatment innovations that have come about as a result of the MacGyvering or the jerry rigging?
Not that I know of. Like pacemaker technology is always evolving, but there's never going to be anything that's going to reverse the full heart block condition. Like it's not like when you have a broken bone it can mend. So far, to my knowledge, unless they do something crazy with stem cells that will start regenerating all these nerve bundles in my heart. That's the only thing I could see that might be a benefit.
Go ahead, Cal.
No, go ahead.
So the medical procedures, the medical team, what have they told you about the percentage of people that have experienced something along these lines? Have they ever seen anything like this before? Are you kind of the frontier of heart science right now?
Well, my pacemaker surgeon, I call him Dr. Kugel in the book because I have to give everybody nicknames to protect
Okay.
themselves or protect me. He said at the end of my last surgery, if anybody wants to become a pacemaker surgeon, they should have to study your case because there's nothing they could come across that's going to be more difficult than what's happened to you.
So you are the leading edge. You're the final frontier or the latest frontier.
Yeah, William Shatner is in my corner, and
So do they often, have you gotten any calls and say, hey, what do you think?
from friends. I have friends that if they have a friend with a cardiac issue, they think because I'm sort of a air quotes expert in this little niche of cardiac that I will understand everything else. And I've picked up a lot, but I certainly don't want to be the person their go-to for medical advice. But I can certainly tell them, which surgeons are good and which surgeons aren't.
Yeah. I mean, you are probably the only person in the world that's like the Michelin guide for heart surgeons. Right? You've got enough experience that you can come up with your own system.
Again, New England Journal of Medicine. Give me a call. So,
And
yeah.
so one of the things I wanted to know is we talked about you being an inspiration. What kind of habits or lifestyle changes have you had to adopt in order to adapt to life with this condition?
Probably the biggest influence on my life is I became an intermittent faster. So, a lot of people have been made aware of intermittent fasting, and it's usually just presented as almost like a diet or a weight loss tool. But intermittent fasting has a lot of health benefits. So, the woman who taught me almost everything I know about intermittent fasting, her name is Jen Stevens, and shameless book plug. Her book is Fast, Feast, Repeat. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. She says intermittent fasting is the health plan with a side benefit of weight loss. And that's what it's been for me. And I ended up being a moderator in Jen's group, and which was, I guess, about 335,000 people at the end of its run. And it's just amazing the things that people report have been, I'll use the word cured. I don't know if that's the right word, but reverse themselves. And it's probably a list in the hundreds because intermittent fasting just resets your body in so many ways. I know dozens and dozens of people that have reversed their type 2 diabetes, myself included. My sleep apnea has gone away. My asthma has gone away. I did one of those sleep tests with my Google phone the other day. It said in my 8 hours of sleeping, I snored once.
Oh, wow.
Like, that's pretty amazing. And, I've got a list of things. Why didn't it cure this condition? I don't know. So maybe I'm feeling ripped off again with that, but dozens of other things. Yeah.
You keep getting extra chances at it. So I'm sure one of these times you'll figure it out.
Yeah. I just can't promote it enough,
So
except for
fasting.
Unless you're, disclaimer, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding or you've had an eating disorder of some sort, probably not the best tool for you. But for a lot of people, we had people in the group that were 88 years old and decided to start intermittent fasting, and their body inflammation went away. They started being able to get down on the floor with their grandkids and get up again. Their joints stopped aching. Their vision cleared up. All sorts of things. It's just off the charts. And if you talk to most scientists, because they can't recreate it in a lab, it doesn't exist to them. Which is the same, when you talk to a lot of doctors about your medical conditions. If they run a test and they can't see something, it must not be happening. And
So-
I ran into a lot of that.
So did you run into a lot of like the doctors thinking maybe it was for attention or anything like that?
Like a
In
psychosomatic.
in a couple of events for sure. I eventually had a stent put in one of my arteries, and it's supposed to be a day surgery now. These things are so common, and when I was in recovery, I was telling the nurse I was having trouble breathing, and she says, "Oh no, your oxygen levels are good. You're not having trouble breathing." I'm saying, "I'm having trouble breathing. Like the physical act of breathing is not going well for me." And she had no concerns about it. And it took me 3 more trips to the ER, and they were saying, "You sure you're not having a panic attack?" And turns out the ER doctor eventually called my cardiologist, who said, "Dude, you're having an allergic reaction to the blood thinner they gave you. Like, it's a no-brainer. This guy should have known that." And he said, "You're having a panic attack." I'm like, well, I was just at my family doctor and my psychiatrist, and neither of them, who have known me for 20 years, thought I was having a panic attack. They thought this was a real issue. So
this was in Canada?
yeah.
Okay.
So, there are actually some good doctors here, and my current team is a bunch of good doctors. I just happened to run into a crapshoot of doctors that, probably shouldn't be doctors, or weren't having their finest moments. However you want to, I don't want to bash doctors or the medical system, because every system has, its high performers and its low performers. I just happened to run into a lot of the bottom end at the beginning of this journey.
I know the feeling.
What do you mean, Kyle? What do you mean? The feeling?
I've had a lot of bottom doctors too.
Bottom rung, bottom shelf doctors.
You gotta scout a little bit.
Yeah, and you've got to advocate for yourself, and it's often hard to do because, do I tell this doctor he's being an ass while simultaneously depending on them to potentially save my life?
Yep.
I don't know that that's going to work out too well sometimes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your book a little bit.
Okay.
The Summer I Died 20 Times. There's a book out called The Summer I Died. Did your book do 20 times more sales than that other book?
I'll say hopefully yes. It doesn't formally come out until March 9th.
Oh, okay.
And it's been an experience. Writing a book is like dying sometimes. I didn't intend to write the book. I intended to do some journaling, and then somebody suggested that I had a good story, and there was a short story contest. So, I've been a marketer for a long time, and I know how to write. So they said, enter this short story contest, and I only had 5 days, and I went way over the word limit, so I couldn't enter. And then it just, went from journaling and helping my memory and all this stuff, and then it became a book project. So
my writing professor told me there's no such thing as good writing, only good rewriting.
I can believe that. I mean, I've done, I don't know how many edits. The publisher's done edits. The beta readers have done edits. The AI software that we use has done edits, and there's still mistakes and misspellings and extra words, and I don't know if you can ever get rid of all of it.
No, probably not.
Well, I'm sure that those little errors or those little, touches of inconsistency here and there are part of, they just kind of become an author's style or signature style, the fingerprint on the literary world. Yours is a biography, so those little things are important because it's not just about the narrator, but also the character who is
Mhm.
also the narrator. So
Mhm.
it's important to tell it in your voice, regardless
Yeah,
of how many other editors there are around you.
yeah, it's part of my charm, I guess.
Do you find that the writing process is more difficult afterwards, after all this, than it was before?
It was pretty difficult because I had a lot of memory loss. So I couldn't remember certain details. So my writing was very fragmented. And I write about this at the front end of the book because I bounce around a lot. We do a lot of time traveling in the book. We're here, then we're there, then we're back there. And because that's the way my memories came back to me. So as I went through the book and I remembered, something A, it would lead to me remembering something B, which might remind me of something C, but C was 2 years ago. So I had to do a lot of back and forth and chopping the book up and putting it in sequence, which was quite difficult for me.
Wow. And and during the whole process of putting the book together, um, that started, I'd have to guess recently, right after the 2018 episodes.
Well, I had started writing probably in 2011ish. Like just sort of maybe a little journaling, very intermittent um, journaling, uh, and then after it happened again, I started trying to write again, and I I knew intuitively that I had to start learning as part of trying to get my brain in shape again, because we know that neuroplasticity happens when you force your brain to learn new skills and things of that nature. So when I started taking courses again, um, I would occasionally dabble in the writing, but it really wasn't until um, the pandemic that I wrote a ton of the book because couldn't do anything else.
Right.
And I happened upon a book by Anne Lamott, and she's won some awards for writing. And her book is called Bird by Bird. And she wrote something that just resonated with me and kicked me into high gear, to be honest. And she said something like, everybody wants to be a published author, but nobody wants to be an author. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be the famous published author unless you actually get to the nitty gritty of writing the damn book.
Right.
And I don't know how I came across the book, but I think it's a good read. And I wish I had learned a little bit more about becoming an author before I became an author.
Did you have to shop the book around a lot, or was it kind of an easy task doing that?
I chopped it around a little bit, but memoirs or biographies aren't really a niche that the traditional publishers want to take a hit on unless you're like a Barack Obama and
Mhm.
it guarantees them, $18 billion in revenue. Repeatedly Dead Fred wasn't somebody they thought. I think if they had a conversation like we're having, and they knew I could have gone on a book tour and presented my charming self, um, on
Without
Good
a
Morning
doubt.
America, it they would have taken me. But I asked around. I networked through a Facebook group that I know, and the woman who runs the group, I asked her, "Do you know any authors who have been published in the group?" And she said, "Yeah, check out this group, Black Rose Writes, smaller independent out of around San Antonio, Texas." And I sent them the manuscript, and they said, make this change, make that change, and I think we'd be very interested. And it was it's probably the most painless process of all of this crap that I've gone through.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So you haven't had another incident since 18?
No, I probably in the last 18 months.
18 months. No, you said that before. That's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did they do something right before that really actually they kind of figured it out, or?
Well, when you have the two pacemakers, I had the one that intermittently failed and the one that was only partially installed. So that became a backup.
Mhm.
They couldn't get it fully installed, so that's how they had to jerry-rig some system. So the backup would sense when the original one failed, and it would kick in. But it's not an exact science. So, sometimes it misinterprets the signal and doesn't think that the original one failed. So then, I'm left with no heartbeat again, and, down you go. So they had to keep tweaking the sensor readings and different combinations between the two pacemakers. And then they finally hit on a combination about 18 months ago that seems to be working well.
So the next step after if these two don't function properly, then the next step is they put a gas powered pacemaker with a pull string, right? That's the final backup.
I'm going to get a Honda generator strapped to me, and I can go anywhere in the United States except California.
Well, you can go. You just got to leave the generator at home. You're taking an extra risk going to California.
Yeah. So the new pacemaker that they just put in, it drains the battery quite significantly. So instead of the normal, 10 to 14 year life expectancy, I've probably got about 7 years. And they don't just replace the battery; they have to take the whole unit out, and they replace the entire unit. So I've got, about 7 years till I have to go through this adventure again.
Do you find that your perception of death has changed at all since all this began in 2009?
That's a really good question. There's the traditional Orthodox idea of heaven, or what they call the world to come. And it's very different than, I guess, the mainstream view that, you're a bunch of angels sitting on clouds with wings and, just lazing around eating Philadelphia cream cheese and bagels. You remember those commercials?
Yeah.
It's more of you're sitting in a master class with the creator, and for eternity, learning the secrets of the universe. So that's I didn't experience any of that, so
That's a bummer.
so I don't know. Yeah,
They got both ends of the thing, the diet. At least you got to see something.
yeah. On the other hand, I didn't go to hell either, so
Yeah, that's a relief.
I'm kind of grateful. But as my mindset, I'm believing that my destiny is the master class, as opposed to anything else. But we really have no way of knowing, do we?
Mm.
Well, I think if anybody would know, it'd be you, right? You've been there.
Yeah.
You've been there more times than anyone I've ever heard of.
Mm-hmm. So, well, indeterminate at this point. in the later incidents in like 2013 and 2018, I had some out of body experiences, where I felt detached. Um, so I don't know if that was my soul trying to leave my body, and it felt very confused. I could definitely look down on whatever field I was when I would collapse or anything like that. Um, and looking around is just like I was alive, except I could see myself. And if you believe in the concept of souls, um, and you know, my soul was trying to leave my body, but maybe it wasn't time. Obviously, it wasn't time. So, there's sort of a glue, uh, some sort of spiritual glue that binds your soul to your body. And when you die, eventually that glue just dissipates. Mine, either I got like a huge overdose of glue, or you know, it just wasn't my time. But the soul was struggling to get away, and then it just, I guess, rebounded back into my body.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was kind of like I guess a materialist or a skeptic when the show began, but we talked to a lot of people, and there's definitely something going on after you die. Like there's just a lot of experiences that people have. Um, Kyle has every time he disappears. Yeah, I start talking about him as soon as he steps out of the room. But he has ghosts in his house.
oh, wild.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of people come on who share experiences about encounters with entities, and to them, they're spirits or ghosts. Um, I don't have any reason to doubt that that's what they're experiencing, other than I've never experienced it myself. But my experience is limited. I've only been around for 40 years, so what do I know? But,
in the traditional Jewish writings, the Talmud, which is a lot of rabbinic back and forth from 2000, 2500 years ago, they talk about spirits and of varying degrees, that these things exist. They're just a different type of life force. And I certainly haven't experienced them myself that I know of, but why would that be any different than a soul?
right.
And some of those were presented as the souls of people, who have lived in a graveyard. There's a great story, and I can't remember which book it's from, of the Talmud, but it talks about this guy whose wife kicked him out because he did something stupid, like guys often do. And so he was spending the night in the graveyard, and he was privy to all these various types of spirits, talking crap to each other. And then one of them gave him some insider trading on crops. I forget what's the Eddie Murphy movie where he becomes a stock trader. Inside trading. Is that? You might be too young for this.
Oh no, I've seen the movie, but Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy's that we're talking about trading places.
Yeah, and so this spirit gives him stock tips on the crops, and he learns what rotation to put his crops in and stuff, and he becomes a very, very wealthy man. So there's all sorts of stories like that.
Sounds very Dickens, very Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
Well,
Predates him a bit, but
yeah. Yes, the whole process of this, it must have been harrowing at times, and yet you keep plugging along, and now you've got the book coming out. Are there any other things you're looking forward to?
Well, hopefully a New York Times bestseller and getting a big royalty check. that would help a lot. But this is going to sound very cliche, like a pro athlete, but just taking it day by day, and every day is a new challenge. There's a lot to learn about marketing a book and creating a book tour and all those sorts of things, and creating a podcast. As you know, if you want to grow your podcast, you have to really put yourself out there and learn a ton of new skills. Like, you think, oh, I'll just have a podcast, so I'll go on Zoom or whatever, or what are we on, StreamYard? And I just record it and I can just put it magically on the internet. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in between those two, so it's a challenge. So I'm up for learning. I like learning. I'm curious. I like meeting new people. So that's part of my drivers.
Well, that's excellent. What's the name of your podcast? Where can people find it?
I've only got a couple of episodes up on YouTube. It's called the Dead Man Walking Podcast. You can sense there's a little bit of a theme there. And they can find me on Instagram at Repeatedly Dead Fred. And feel free to send me a DM or make a comment on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share everything. Share this podcast when it comes out, because the hosts are great, even though Kyle abandoned us.
I've got your Instagram page up here. Let me see if I can get that up.
Yeah.
And yeah, the first post is, you want Repeatedly Dead Fred as a guest on your podcast. Watch and learn why.
Yeah, that was something else I had to learn. That was a doodly, those whiteboard animations, stuff like that. So that was my first attempt into doing a video. And, you have to learn some workarounds in that software. It probably needs a bit of an update, but it was fun, and it got me on a lot of podcasts. So.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I got landscapers right outside, so I apologize for that. But make sure that you guys follow Repeatedly DF on Instagram, Repeatedly Dead Fred. Look for Fred's book, I assume on Amazon when it comes out.
Yeah, it should be major retailers as well.
Major retailers, Amazon. Look for the Dead Man Walking podcast on YouTube. And if you like our content, you've enjoyed, and you want to see more of the kind of out there, edge of reality type stuff, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe. And until next time, keep on exploring the edges of the unknown.